The woman came out of the dark like something the road had chewed up and spat back out, and Jasper Stone nearly dropped his lantern when she staggered through the stable doors of the Broken Wheel Inn. He had been finishing late, as he usually was. The cavalry detachment quartered at the inn had ridden in that afternoon with 17 horses needing reshod, and Jasper was the only farrier between Thornwall and the Greymarsh crossing, which meant he worked until his back screamed and his knuckles bled and the last shoe was nailed down tight. It was well past midnight. The stable hands had gone to their cots. The horses were quiet in their stalls, breathing that warm, slow breath that smelled of hay and honest labor, and Jasper had been banking his forge coals when the door banged open and she came in. She was an orc woman. He understood that first. Then he understood she was bleeding. She wore travel leathers, worn to a deep reddish brown, fitted close to a frame that was broad-shouldered and powerfully built, the kind of body that spoke of a life lived hard and without apology. The bodice was reinforced along the sides with overlapping strips of boiled hide, and below it, her leggings were tucked into short boots with iron toe guards. A wide belt cinched her waist and held the sheath for a blade that was no longer in it. The laces of her bodice on the left side had been cut and retied clumsily, and through the gap dark fabric had been wadded against a wound. Her tusks were short and elegantly curved, and her skin was the deep forest green of old moss. Her hair was black as forge iron, braided back from her face, but half of it had come loose and hung across one sharp cheekbone. She had eyes the color of pale amber, and those eyes were absolutely ferocious even as her right leg dragged, and she caught herself against the nearest stall post with one shaking hand. She looked at him and she looked at his lantern and her jaw tightened. "I am not asking for charity," she said. Her voice was low and rough and beautifully controlled, like a woman holding a very heavy thing with both hands. "I need somewhere to sit for 1 hour. That is all." Jasper Stone was 31 years old, a farrier of no particular fame, a man of medium height with wide, calloused hands, dark hair gone a little silver at the temples from too many years of forge heat and stress, and a face that people regularly forgot before they had finished looking at it. He was not a soldier or a lord or a man accustomed to heroics. He was a man who shod horses for a living and slept in the grain room when the inn was full because the innkeeper let him board there in exchange for keeping the cavalry contract. He looked at her leg. He looked at the wound at her side. He set the lantern on the iron hook above the forge and said, "Sit down before you fall down." She stared at him for a beat too long, as if she was deciding whether he was a threat or an inconvenience. "I said I am not asking. You said you need somewhere to sit. There is a stool right behind you. I am going to get water and clean cloth. Nobody is going to bother you." He turned and walked to the supply corner without waiting for her answer, because he had learned over the years that people in pain needed you to act like the situation was manageable before they could believe that it was. He heard the scrape of the stool. He heard her weight come down onto it, and the way she exhaled, just once, the kind of exhale that meant she had been holding herself together for a very long time, and had only just barely reached a place where she could afford to let a fraction of that tension out. He brought back the water bucket, the clean rags he kept for wiping down tools, and the small clay jar of wound paste the army physician had left behind 3 weeks ago in exchange for Jasper repairing the hinges on his instrument case. He crouched in front of her and looked at her leg first. Her legging had a ragged tear from knee to mid-thigh, and through it he could see a deep graze, long and ugly but not arterial. The flesh around it was bruised purple and swollen. The wound at her side concerned him more. She had done a decent job of packing it, but the cloth was soaked through. What happened? He asked not out of nosiness, but because the kind of wound told you a lot about the kind of danger still following it. "Ambush," she said, "on the trade road 3 miles east." Jasper's hands went still for just a moment. The trade road. He had been on that road this morning, riding back from Thornwall with a load of bar iron. "How many?" "There were 6 of them," she said. "There are now 4." A pause. "They had a slaver's charter, a writ of recovery." The words were controlled, but underneath them was something that sounded like rage held at enormous cost. I was taken in the Crossfield market 4 months ago, sold as a prize of the Duskbane campaign. I have been moving west for 11 days. Jasper looked up at her. She met his eyes without flinching. The writ names me as property. If they find me here, there is law on their side in this province. You should know that before you decide to do anything other than give me a stool. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he went back to cleaning the graze on her leg with the same careful, methodical attention he gave to a horse's hoof. The province magistrate is in Greymarsh, he said. That is 4 days east. The law on that writ takes 3 weeks to execute even if the magistrate signs it today, and you would have the right to contest it at the district court in Veldon. He rinsed the cloth. Also, I am a farrier, not a lawman, and this is a stable. The only people in here right now are you and me and 17 horses who do not care about slavers' charters. Something shifted in her face. Not softness exactly, but the particular quality of a woman who had been braced for the world to be worse than it was and found herself unexpectedly miscalculated. My name is Ghorza, she said. Ghorza Doomhammer. Jasper Stone. He began applying the wound paste to the graze with 2 fingers. Does anything feel broken in that leg? No, the horse they were riding down threw me when I cut its foreleg strap. I hit the road shoulder. She watched him work. You know how to do this. I have been doctoring horses since I was 14. People are not that different structurally. He tied off the cleaned leg wound with a strip of cloth and moved his attention to her side. This one I need to look at properly. May I? She untied the cut laces herself, holding the wadded cloth in place, and let him take over. The wound was a knife cut deep but clean, perhaps 3 inches long, just below the floating rib. It had clotted, which was good. He cleaned it carefully, pressed fresh cloth against it, and rebandaged it tight with strips torn from the hem of his own work shirt because he had run out of rags. That needs stitching, he said. I cannot do that, but the innkeeper's wife can. She has done it before. I do not want anyone else to know I am here. Marta Holt is the innkeeper's wife, and she has been keeping travelers' secrets since before either of us was born. She will not sell you. He sat back on his heels. But it is your choice. Ghorza looked at the bandaging at her side. She looked at the stable around her, the warm amber light of the lantern, the drowsing horses, the banked forge still radiating its low heat. She looked at Jasper Stone crouched on the stable floor in front of her with his blood-damp shirt and his quiet, steady hands. You trust her, Ghorza said. Completely. A long pause. Outside, somewhere on the trade road, 4 men with a slaver's charter were presumably regrouping. The wind moved through the stable eaves. All right, Ghorza said. Marta Holt was 60 years old, built like a barrel of salted pork, and had the expression of a woman who had seen everything the road could produce and was mildly irritated by all of it. She came down to the stable in her nightgown and her husband's coat, looked at Ghorza without blinking, clicked her tongue at the wound, and stitched it closed with the focused efficiency of someone darning a sock. She wrapped the site with clean linen from her own stores and did not ask a single question. Before she left, she pressed a wedge of hard cheese and half a loaf of yesterday's bread into Ghorza's hands. The east-facing loft has 2 empty bales for a bed, and no one will go up there until morning muck out, Marta said. That is 5 hours. Use them. She went back inside without further ceremony. Ghorza looked at the bread in her hands. Something crossed her face that was very old and very private. She ate a piece of the cheese slowly, like she was remembering what it meant to eat something given freely. Jasper laid his oilskin work coat on the floor beneath the loft ladder. Sleep, he said. I will be here. You do not have to. I finish late most nights anyway. It was not entirely untrue. He pulled his stool close to the forge, put his back against the warm iron shell of it, and stretched his legs out in front of him. Ghorza climbed the loft ladder slowly, favoring her right side. She settled into the hay above. After a few minutes, the rustling stopped. Jasper sat awake in the dark and thought about slavers' charters and 4 men on the trade road, and a woman with amber eyes who had come limping out of the night into his lantern's light. He was still awake when the stable doors opened 2 hours later, and one of the 4 men came in. He was a lean, sharp-nosed human in road dusty leather, and he had the careful way of moving that Jasper associated with professional trackers. He carried a short sword and a rolled document at his belt. He looked around the stable with practiced eyes that moved from stall to stall. "Farrier," the man said, "you the one who keeps this stable. I shoe the horses. The stable master sleeps inside." Jasper did not stand up from his stool. "Something wrong with your mount. Looking for a runaway." Big orc woman, green skin, black hair. She would be injured. Seen anything like that? Jasper let the silence sit for exactly the right amount of time. Not too fast, not too slow. "I have been here all night," he said. "Only traffic I have seen is wind." The man looked at him for a long moment. His gaze moved slowly around the stable again, lingering on the upper shadows of the loft. Jasper felt something cold walk up his spine, but he kept his face the same as it always was, which was to say, present, unremarkable, and empty of anything interesting. It was the face that made people forget him before they had finished looking. Tonight it was the most useful face he had ever worn. "You hear anything on the road?" the man pressed. "I keep my ears on the horses. Easier to manage." The tracker stood there another moment, then turned and walked back out. Jasper waited until the sound of hoofbeats had faded east before he let himself breathe fully. From the loft above him came Ghorza's voice, quiet as smoke. "I heard that. I know. You lied well. I shod horses for the cavalry for 7 years. You learn to be careful with what you say around men who want information." A pause. Then, "Thank you, Jasper Stone." Nobody said his name like that. It was an odd thing to notice, lying in a stable in the middle of the night with a tracker potentially circling back outside, but there it was. She said it like his name was a real thing and not just a label someone had slapped on a forgettable man. "Get some more sleep," he said. "You will need it." In the morning, Jasper made a decision that he could not have entirely explained. He told Marta Holt, over the morning's first mug of tea in the inn kitchen, that he had a friend in the stable who needed a room and a few days to mend, and that if anyone came asking, she had been there all week and had paid in advance. Marta raised her eyebrows once, and then said the back room on the second floor had a window that faced the courtyard rather than the road, and she would leave a key under the stone frog by the kitchen door. He brought the key to Ghorza. She was sitting up in the loft in the early morning light, eating the last of the bread with deliberate calm, and she looked at the key in his extended hand for a long moment before she took it. "You are making yourself responsible for me," she said. "You need somewhere safe while you mend. After that, you do whatever you want to do. You do not know me. I know you survived an ambush, killed 2 men, and were still polite about it when you came in here. That is enough for a room key." She looked at him a long time. He could see her working something out, some calculation about trust and risk and what it cost to accept help from a stranger. He understood that calculation. He had run it himself after enough years of being on his own. "I will repay you," she said, "whatever the room costs. When you are well enough to worry about it, we can talk about it. Until then, eat the rest of that bread." She did. And then she climbed down from the loft, moving more carefully than the night before, and he watched the way she held herself as she crossed the stable floor, spine straight, chin level, tusks set, amber eyes already mapping every exit. She was injured and hunted, and she walked like she owned every room she stepped into. It did him something to see that. He was not sure what to do with the feeling, so he went to work. The back room on the second floor was small but private, with a plank bed, a wool blanket, a wash basin, and the south-facing courtyard window Marta had mentioned. Ghorza spent the first 2 days there mostly sleeping, waking to eat the meals Marta sent up without explanation via the kitchen boy. On the 3rd day she came downstairs in the late afternoon when the common room was only half full, and sat at the table near the kitchen hearth where Jasper was eating his supper. She set a small coin on the table between them. "For the room so far," she said. He looked at the coin. It was an orcish silver, which he recognized because the cavalry quartermaster sometimes paid in them. Where did this come from? I had it inside the lining of my belt. She sat down across from him. She moved more easily now but still favored her left. I had more, but they took most of it when they took me. She said it flatly, without self-pity, the way you would describe bad weather. I know the trade routes west. Once I am well, I can make wages as a guide or a guard. I am good at both. I believe that. She looked at him steadily. Why are you doing this? He considered the question honestly. Because you needed help and I had it to give, and because a slaver's writ is a rotten piece of law and I am not going to enforce it. You could be fined. Imprisoned if the magistrate is the kind who cares. The magistrate in this district is not that kind. He is the kind who is mostly concerned with getting his cut of the toll taxes and going home. He took a piece of bread and pushed the rest of the loaf toward her. The men who ambushed you, will they try again? Yes. She said it simply. The man who holds the writ is named Edric Sorn. He is a professional recovery agent out of Duskbane. He will not leave without his asset or his fee. A tightness at the corner of her mouth. That is what they called me, his asset. Jasper watched her jaw set around those words and felt something in his chest heat up the way the forge did when you open the bellows, quick and fierce. Tell me about the writ, he said. How was it filed? She told him. It took a while. He listened carefully the way he listened to everything, and when she was done he said, the Duskbane campaign ended 14 months ago. The treaty that closed it included a clause prohibiting the sale of war prizes from either side. If the original sale violated that clause, the writ built on it is invalid. She stared at him. How do you know that? I shod horses for the garrison at Velden when the treaty negotiators came through. They talked. A lot. I keep my ears on what is around me. He met her eyes. There is a treaty copy at the district archive in Thornwall. If you could get a certified extract of that clause and present it to any magistrate, the writ is void. Ghorza Doomhammer sat very still across the supper table from him. Thornwall is 2 days west, she said slowly. I have a supply run to Thornwall in 4 days. I go once a month for bar iron and shoe stock. He shrugged. If you want to ride along, there is room on the wagon. She was quiet for a while. Outside the inn, the road trade rumbled past, wagons and riders and the ordinary noise of the world that did not know she existed. Jasper Stone, she said finally, and again his name came out of her like it weighed something real and specific. Do you know what Edric Sorn will do if he sees you helping me escape the writ? I expect he will be irritated. Something happened at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, but a sister to one. That is one word for it. I have dealt with irritated men before. These men carry crossbows. I have dealt with those too, in a limited capacity. She looked at him across the table, this unremarkable, forgettable man with his calloused hands and his too steady eyes, and whatever she found there made her sit back slightly, as if she needed the extra distance to look at him properly. 4 days, she said. 4 days. In the meantime, stay off the roadside of the inn and stay away from the front windows. She nodded slowly. I can work, she added, with an edge in her voice that told him this was not negotiable. I will not sit idle. I can help in the stable. He thought about that. It would keep her out of the common room and the road-facing parts of the inn. All right. Early mornings and late evenings when the cavalry detail has changed watch. Good. She stood from the table, then paused. The wound paste you used, where did you get it? Army physician. Why? I made something similar in the clan, yarrow and rendered tallow and a pinch of copper ash. Your physician is not far off, but he uses too much tallow. It goes rancid in heat. She looked at the jar he had set on the table edge earlier when bandaging her had required both hands. I can make better. If there is a market stall in the village that carries dried herbs, he found himself almost smiling. I will ask Marta about the herbs. The 4 days passed in a rhythm that Jasper had not known he missed until he was in the middle of it. Ghorza came to the stable in the gray before dawn and the blue after dark, and she worked as she had promised she could, quietly and without fuss, and with an instinctive understanding of horses that matched his own. She had grown up in a clan that ran horses on the eastern plains. She told him while they worked one morning side by side, and she had learned to ride before she could read orcish glyphs. She moved among the cavalry mounts with a certainty that the horses responded to immediately. The big roan gelding that had been refusing to take the near hind shoe for 3 weeks stood quietly for her within 5 minutes of her first approach, and Jasper stood back and watched it happen with the professional appreciation of a man witnessing skill. She watched him work too. She watched the way he checked a hoof before he started, the way he shaped and fitted each shoe individually rather than forcing a standard size, the way he spoke in a low, ongoing murmur to the horse while he worked. He did not notice her watching until she said, "You talk to them. It helps." "What do you say?" He thought about it. "I tell them what I am doing before I do it, so they are not startled." She was quiet for a moment. "My clan's horse handlers did the same. I thought they were eccentric." "Probably not. Probably not," she agreed, and this time the sister of a smile came all the way through. He made a note of that smile and put it somewhere careful inside himself. The herb stall in the village market did carry dried yarrow, and Ghorza made her wound paste in the kitchen corner. Marta cleared for her with the same practical tolerance she extended to everyone who stayed too long at the broken wheel and proved useful. The new paste was, as Ghorza had predicted, better. Marta tested it on a kitchen burn, and said so with the air of someone granting a significant concession. On the second afternoon, Jasper saw Edric Sorn again. Sorn was a lean man of about 40, sharp-featured, with the particular economy of movement that said former military and current mercenary. He came through the broken wheel's common room with 2 of his men, while Jasper was sitting at the bar eating lunch, and Jasper tracked them in the mirror behind the barkeeper's shelf without turning around. Sorn asked Marta at the reception desk whether any orc women had been seen in the area. Marta listened politely, said she had not seen any such person, and was sorry she could not be more helpful, with the warm, implacable authority of a woman who had been declining to be of service to men she disliked for 30 years. Sorn lingered in the common room for an uncomfortable 20 minutes, watching the stairs, watching the doors. Jasper ate his meal without hurrying and kept his face the way he always kept it. Sorn left. Jasper went to the stable by the back way through the kitchen and found Ghorza already at the far end, half hidden in the stall of the big roan, one hand on the horse's neck, her amber eyes sharp and waiting. "I saw them from the courtyard window," she said quietly. "Second floor. They have not gone far." Sorn is circling. Jasper leaned against the stall door. "He is good at this. How did he track you from Crossfield?" "He has a dog. I lost it in the Marker River crossing." Her jaw was tight. "I thought I had more time. We leave for Thornwall in 2 days. I am going to move the trip up." He thought fast. "Tomorrow night, after the 3rd watch change, the road will be quiet for about 2 hours. We take the wagon then." Ghorza looked at him. "Moving in the dark with a wagon is slow." "I know this road in the dark. I have been on it 400 times. He met her eyes. "Do you trust me?" A beat of silence that was heavy and honest and real. "Yes," she said. The word did something to him. He filed it carefully next to the memory of her smile. The night before they were due to leave, he was finishing the last of the cavalry horses by lamplight when Ghorza appeared at the stable entrance with 2 cups of something hot from the kitchen. She handed him one without ceremony and sat on the stool that had become, in 4 days, specifically her stool. She was moving nearly normally now. The cut on her leg had closed clean, and the rib-side wound, which Marta had checked and redressed twice, was healing without fever. She was still beautiful in a way that Jasper kept trying not to think about too directly, because it felt like wanting something that was not on any table he had ever been invited to sit at. "Tell me about the farrier's life," she said, as if they had been in the middle of a conversation. "How does one come to be the man who shoes the horses?" He picked up the last hoof and checked it. "Apprenticed at 14 to a farrier in Velden. Worked for him 6 years. After that I followed the cavalry contracts. The army always needs a farrier and they pay reliably, which is more than you can say for most civilian work." He set the hoof down and straightened. "It is not glamorous." "No," she said. But it is honest. That is what it is. She drank from her cup. The lantern between them threw warm light and long shadows. Outside, the road was quiet. I was a warband scout, she said, not quite out of nowhere, but with the feeling of something offered after calculation. Before the Duskbane campaign, I scouted the eastern borders for my clan for 4 years. I was good at it. A pause. The campaign came west through the Grey Pass. My warband was 3 riders. We were ahead of the main line, doing advance route work. The ambush hit us from the ridgeline above Greywash Creek. She was looking at the middle distance. I was the one who survived. Jasper was quiet. They had a contract with a Duskbane lord. War prizes were legal in that district under martial provision. By the time anyone could have argued otherwise, I was already in the market at Crossfield. She looked at her cup. I killed one of the guards on the 4th day and ran. They caught me 3 days later in the high pass and put a collar on me. Her voice was level as river stone, but her hand on the cup had whitened at the knuckles. I killed the man holding the collar chain when we crossed the river into this province, because this province fell under general law once the campaign ended, and the treaty clause you mentioned is exactly what I suspected and could not prove. You have been working this out for months, Jasper said. Every hour of every day. She looked at him directly now. When I came into your stable, I had 11 silvers, no blade, a bad leg, and the knowledge that the writ was technically void if someone could produce the treaty text. I was going to Thornwall with or without you. You simply made it survivable. He thought about what she had carried alone for months. He thought about the ambush on the road, the 2 dead men, the 11 days of wounded travel across unfamiliar country. You are the most capable person I have met in years, he said. She looked startled. Not embarrassed, not pleased in a soft way, but startled as if she had braced for something else and received entirely the wrong thing. That is a strange compliment, she said. It is the honest one. The silence between them was different after that, warmer, more conscious of itself. Jasper, she said and paused. What? She looked at him across the lantern and the space between their stools, and whatever she had been about to say she held back for a moment and then said instead, You should sleep. We have a long night tomorrow. So should you. She stood, took his empty cup along with hers and paused at the stable door. You are going to be very difficult to repay adequately, she said, and her voice held something underneath that was not quite teasing but was not entirely serious either. You already paid for the room, he said. She made a sound that was, definitively, a laugh. It was the first one he had heard from her, and it was low and warm and brief, and it left the stable feeling larger and smaller at the same time once she was gone. He sat with the horses and the cooling forge and the feeling in his chest for a long time. They left the broken wheel at the 2nd hour past midnight. Marta Holt stood at the kitchen door to see them go, and the look she gave Jasper was the look of a woman who noticed things and approved of some of them. She gave Ghorza the leftover half of a salt pork joint wrapped in cloth, and Ghorza thanked her with a formality that was, Jasper had come to understand, the way she expressed genuine feeling toward people she respected. The wagon was his own, a low-sided freight rig, iron-banded, with 2 steady draft horses named Burn and Collar that he had shod himself, and trusted with his life in the way you trusted a tool you had made with your own hands. He loaded the empty bar iron cases in back, and Ghorza sat on the board beside him with her legs stretched out and her knife, which he had found sheathed on a rack in the stable 4 days ago, and quietly set outside her room door, back on her belt where it belonged. The road was silver-gray under an almost full moon, and the trees on either side stood black and still. Jasper drove at the steady ground-eating pace he used when he wanted distance covered quietly, and Ghorza sat with her eyes moving constantly, tracking the road ahead, the tree line, the crossroads markers. After half an hour she said, Northeast of us. 1 rider. He listened. He could not hear anything. How far? Half a mile, maybe less, moving parallel to the road through the tree line. That is Sorn's style, he said. I know. She turned on the board to look back down the road behind them. We have not been followed from the inn they set up ahead, Jasper thought fast. The Millway Fork is a quarter-mile ahead. If I take the South Fork and cut through Hensbridge, it adds 2 hours, but we lose the tree line. Take it. He took it. The wagon rumbled south onto the narrower road, and the trees gave way to open farmland, broad and flat and silver with moonlight, nothing to hide in for a quarter-mile in any direction. He heard the rider in the tree line stop. After a few minutes, the sound moved north, away from them. Ghorza let out a breath. Hensbridge will work, but we should move faster. He shook the reins, and Burn and Collar stretched into a trot. The wagon rattled over the packed dirt road, and the farms rolled past them on either side, dark and sleeping. And beside him, Ghorza had one hand braced on the board and her face turned into the wind with an expression that was something between alertness and relief. After a while she said, "You know this country very well. I have ridden it in all weathers and all hours for 7 years." He kept his eyes on the road. "There is a hidden crossing at the Millway drainage channel about 2 miles ahead that the main road does not use. We can cut back to the Thornwall Road from the other side and be well past Sorn's position. You planned this." "I thought about it." She turned to look at him. The moonlight was on her face and the wind had loosened more of her braid. "You are better at this than you let on," she said. "I have a simple face," he said. "It makes people underestimate me. I have never corrected them." She watched him for a moment longer. Then she turned back to the road, but she did not pull back the hand that had shifted from the board to rest on the seat between them, close enough that his knuckle was almost touching her wrist. They drove through Hensbridge while the village slept, over the drainage crossing in the dark with only Jasper's knowledge of the road keeping them from the ditch, and back onto the Thornwall Road on the far side of where any of Sorn's men could reach before dawn. By first light they were 12 miles west of the broken wheel and the road was empty behind them. Jasper pulled the horses to a walk and let them breathe. Beside him, Ghorza was asleep. She had gone under somewhere in the last hour, her injured side eased down against the wagon board, her head tilted back. Her knife was still loose in her hand. She looked in sleep, both fiercer and more exhausted than she did awake, the lines of her face unguarded, her tusks small and elegant in the morning light. He adjusted his coat from his shoulders without stopping the horses and laid it over her with the careful deliberateness of a man who understood that she would not want to wake and find herself cold and uncovered. She woke half an hour later, sat upright, took in the road and the light in his coat and looked at him. He kept his eyes on the horses. Another 4 hours to Thornwall at this pace. A silence. Then, "Thank you. You needed the sleep." She touched the collar of his coat with 2 fingers. Then she folded it neatly and set it on the board between them and straightened her braid and did not say anything else for a while, but the quality of the silence had changed again. Thornwall was a working town, neither pretty nor ugly, built at the juncture of 2 major trade roads with the practical efficiency of a place that had decided long ago that commerce mattered more than aesthetics. The district archive was in a sandstone building on the West Square, staffed by 2 clerks who were suspicious of everyone by professional habit, but could be moved by the right coin and the right patience. Jasper had dealt with one of them before, a thin man named Horace who had certified several purchase documents for Jasper's iron supply contracts. He left Ghorza in a tack-end feed store off the main road, told the proprietor she was his hire for the wagon journey, and went to see Horace alone. It took 2 hours and 3 separate requests, and the largest archive fee Jasper had paid for anything that was not a horse. But he came out of the archive building with a certified extract of Article 9 of the Duskbane Treaty, which stated in clear legal language that the sale or transfer of persons taken as war prizes during the campaign was voided retroactively by the treaty's ratification, and that any writs of recovery based on such sales were without force in all signatory provinces. He found Ghorza in the feed store, calmly repairing a bridle that the proprietor had asked her to look at. She looked up when he came in and he held up the document. She crossed the store floor in 4 strides, took the document with both hands and read it. He watched her read it. He watched her jaw work once, and then she pressed the document against her chest for a moment, eyes closed and breathed. Then she opened her eyes and looked at him over the top of the paper, and her amber eyes were very bright. "This ends it," she said. "If I present this to a magistrate and Sorn shows his writ is void. The nearest magistrate is here in Thornwall. I know where his office is." She looked at the document in her hands. Then she looked at Jasper Stone, farrier, forgettable-faced man who drove a freight wagon across moonlit roads and kept his ears on the conversations of treaty negotiators. "Why?" she said, and then stopped and tried again. "Why did you go this far?" He was quiet for a moment. The honest answer was the one he had been not saying since the first night in the stable, because honest answers about why you had gone further for someone than you could justify tended to send people running. But she was standing here with a document that could free her pressed to her chest and amber eyes that were asking him a real question. "Because you walked into my lantern's light," he said simply, "and I did not want to be the man who looked away." She was very still. "Also," he said, "because the honesty had started and might as well keep going, because I think you are remarkable, and I wanted to see what happened next." Something moved through Ghorza Doomhammer's face that was deep and complicated and not something Jasper could name yet. She folded the document with care, tucked it inside her belt, and reached out and put her hand against the side of his face for just a moment, her palm warm and rough and deliberate, the way she did everything. Then she let her hand fall. "Show me where the magistrate is," she said. The magistrate was a stocky woman named Barrow who wore her office like a coat she had owned long enough to stop noticing. She read the certified extract. She read the description of the writ of recovery, and she wrote out a declaration of legal nullity in under 10 minutes, charging the standard fee and adding her seal with the efficient lack of drama of someone who knew when a case was closed. Ghorza walked out of the magistrate's office onto the Thornwall Square in the afternoon sun with a sealed declaration in her hand and no writ on her back, and she stopped in the middle of the square and tilted her face up into the light for a moment. The square was busy with market traffic, carters and stalls and townspeople, and a few of them looked at her the way people looked at orcs in human towns, with that particular assessment, but she did not notice or did not care. She was standing in the sun in the middle of a public square with her freedom made legal and whole. Jasper stood beside her and said nothing, because there was nothing useful to say. After a moment she lowered her face and looked at him and said, "We should send a copy of this to the district archive in Greymarsh. I will do that from here before we leave." "Good." She looked at the square, at the market stalls, at the town. Something in her was recalibrating, a woman who had been running and fighting for months and had arrived somewhere she had not entirely expected to arrive. "What do you need from Thornwall?" she asked. "Bar iron, shoe stock." "Yes." "Then let us get it and go," she said. "I will help you load." They spent the afternoon in the Thornwall Ironworks yard, and the drive back east was made in full daylight on the main road with a wagon full of bar iron. And Ghorza sat beside him on the board and watched the country with the eyes of a scout who was no longer hiding from it. She told him more about her clan, the Doomhammer kin, who ran the eastern grasslands between the Greymark and the Stoneback Range. A war-band tradition, horse culture, clan councils held in the open air around fires large enough that you could see the faces of everyone speaking. Jasper asked questions, and she answered them. And he told her about Velden and the 6 years of his apprenticeship, and the farrier master who had been a hard teacher and a good one. By the time they reached the broken wheel, the sun was setting, and they knew each other considerably better than they had at dawn. Marta met them in the courtyard with the expression of someone who had been moderately worried and was relieved to be able to stop being so. "Sorn was back," she said quietly, "this morning. I told him you had taken the wagon to Greenbridge for nail stock and that I expected you tonight." "Good." Jasper unhooked the horses. "We have a nullity declaration. His writ is void." Marta looked at Ghorza. "Good," she said, with the same single-word finality she applied to most things she approved of, and went back inside. Ghorza helped him stable the horses and unload the bar iron to the forge room. Working in the last of the evening light, moving around each other in the familiar rhythm they had developed over 4 days, Jasper felt something he rarely felt and had nearly stopped expecting to feel. He felt, simply and completely, like the evening was exactly where he was supposed to be. He was checking collars left 4 when he became aware that Ghorza had stopped working and was watching him. He looked up. She was standing a few feet away, and she was looking at him with an expression that was direct and unguarded, and that he recognized, with a start, as want. Plain and powerful and entirely Ghorza, not hidden or softened or presented sideways. She looked at him the way she looked at everything she was serious about, his hand stilled on the horse's hoof. "You said," she said carefully, "that you wanted to see what happened next. I did say that. I want to know whether what happens next is something we are both interested in or whether you were speaking about the legal situation." He set the hoof down. He stood up to his full height, which was not impressive, and looked at her. "I was not speaking about the legal situation." She came to him with the same directness she did everything, 2 steps closing the distance, and she put both hands on his shoulders and kissed him. It was not a tentative kiss. It was the kiss of a woman who had decided something and was not interested in hedging. She was warm and solid and taller than him by 2 inches, and she kissed him like she was reclaiming something she had decided was hers, and his hands came up and found her waist and held on. When she pulled back, her amber eyes were very close and very bright. "Good," she said, in the same tone that Marta used for things she approved of. He laughed. He could not help it, and she looked briefly startled, and then her smile came all the way through for the second time, full and warm and real, and it was better than the first. Soren came back the next morning. Jasper saw the 3 riders in the inn yard from the stable window as he was laying out his morning tools and felt the cold familiar walk up his spine. He took the copy of the nullity declaration from his coat pocket, the one he had kept rather than sent, and went to the common room. Soren was at the bar. His 2 remaining men stood behind him. The morning crowd was thin, just a few traveling merchants eating breakfast and the innkeeper's boy sweeping. Marta was behind the bar with her arms crossed in a way that indicated she had already been minimally cooperative and intended to remain that way. Jasper walked into the common room, and Soren looked at him with the assessment of a man who had been lied to and was deciding how to respond to the person who had done it. "You told me you had seen nothing on the road," Soren said. "I told you I had seen no traffic from my side of the stable door," Jasper said. "I keep my ears on the horses." Soren's eyes were flat and gray. "Where is she?" "She who?" "You know exactly who." Soren moved away from the bar. His hand was near his sword. The common room had gone quiet. The merchants were very interested in their plates. The innkeeper's boy had stopped sweeping. Jasper held up the document. Certified extract of Article 9 of the Duskbin Treaty, sealed by Magistrate Barrow of Thornwall District, accompanied by a declaration of nullity dated yesterday. He set it on the bar between them. "Any writ of recovery based on a Duskbane War Prize sale is void under provincial law as of 14 months ago. That includes yours." Soren looked at the document. His jaw tightened. Jasper watched him work the calculation. The seal was real, the magistrate's name was real, and the document said exactly what Jasper claimed. Soren was a professional, and professionals understood when a case was closed. He was not happy about it, and Jasper could see the part of him that was considering other options, and the part of him that was doing the math on whether those options were worth the consequences. That was when Ghorza came through the common room door from the kitchen end. She had heard them, obviously. She moved to stand beside Jasper, not behind him, not in front of him, but precisely beside him, and she looked at Edric Soren with the face of a woman who had been hunted and recovered and was done being moved. Soren looked at her. He looked at the document. He looked at the farrier standing beside her. "This is not finished," Soren said. Yes, it is, Ghorza said. Her voice was entirely quiet. You file an appeal and I contest it at Velden District Court with treaty documentation and a nullity declaration, and you spend 3 months in proceedings to lose. Or you ride east and take another contract. A pause. I suggest the second. One of Soren's men had shifted toward his crossbow. Jasper did not move because any movement would escalate, and he was watching Soren watch Ghorza, and he could see the calculation resolving. Soren picked up the document from the bar. He read it. He set it back down. Copy the seal reference number, he said to one of his men flatly. He looked at Ghorza once more, the look of a man logging a loss. If the clan treaty status changes, this document is revisable. The clan treaty status will not change, Ghorza said. Soren turned and walked out. His men followed. The door closed. The common room stayed quiet for a long moment. Then one of the merchants went back to his breakfast, and the innkeeper's boy resumed sweeping, and Marta Holt reached under the bar and produced a bottle of brandy she kept for notable occasions and poured 2 small cups. Drink, she said to both of them. Before you get shaky. Jasper picked up a cup. His hand was in fact slightly unsteady. He drank. Beside him, Ghorza was looking at the closed door with an expression that was not victory and was not relief, but was something calmer and older than both. She picked up the second cup and turned to face him. He will not come back, she said. He files a revisable loss and moves on. It is not worth his fees. I know, she looked at him. You were not afraid. I was somewhat afraid, he said honestly. I just did not show it. She watched him for a moment, and then she drank her brandy and set the cup down with a gentle click. That, she said, is a Doomhammer quality. He was not sure what to do with that, so he drank the rest of his brandy and tried not to look too pleased about it. The weeks that followed were some of the most unexpectedly good weeks of Jasper Stone's life, and he was not entirely sure what to do with that either. Ghorza did not leave. She had nowhere particular to be. Her clan's eastern clan house was 6 weeks' travel away, and the autumn roads were turning to mud. And she had mentioned once that she needed to build travel funds before attempting the crossing. She took work at the Broken Wheel as a guard for the overnight watch, a role she performed with a silent competence that made the usual drunken travelers behave significantly better than usual. And Marta paid her a fair wage and moved her to the slightly larger back room without being asked. She and Jasper fell into a pattern that was easy in the way that only the right things were easy. Morning stable work, evening meals at the kitchen table, long conversations in the space between the forge's warmth and the world's noise. She told him about the Doomhammer clan's traditions, the herd runs, the council fires, the marking rites that bound warband partners, the claiming rite she had grown up watching between orc couples and had privately thought about since she was old enough to understand it. He told her about the years of following cavalry contracts alone, the particular loneliness of a man who fixed other people's equipment so they could go somewhere, always staying behind when the horses moved out. You stayed behind on purpose, she said one evening. He looked up from the bridle he was repairing. What? You said you stayed when the horses moved out, but you chose the cavalry contract work. You could have taken civilian work and stayed in one place. You chose the work that meant you were always close to movement without being the one moving. She was watching him with the direct amber gaze that he had come to understand was her sharpest mode. Why? He thought about it seriously because she was asking seriously. I think I was waiting for something, he said, without knowing what. She was quiet for a moment. I think that is what I was doing too, she said, scouting, always at the edge of things, looking. And then the campaign. And then the campaign, a pause, and then the stable at the Broken Wheel. He looked at her across the lantern. And you, she said quietly, looking at me like I was worth finding. He set the bridle down and crossed the stable floor and kissed her, because there was no other possible response to that. She wrapped her arms around his shoulders and kissed him back with a warmth that was entirely different from the first declarative kiss, slower and deeper and full of something that was not urgency but certainty, the way you touched something you had decided was yours. When she pulled back, she rested her forehead against his. "Jasper Stone," she said, "you are going to make this very complicated." "I hope so." She laughed, the warm, low laugh he had been collecting, and held him tighter. There was a night in the third week when two men in the common room made a mistake. Jasper had been at the bar eating late after a long day repairing the iron bands on 3 wagon wheels, in addition to his regular shoeing work. He was tired and a little sore and thinking about nothing in particular when the two men at the corner table, who had been drinking since early afternoon and were well past the point of good judgment, decided to make a number of comments about Ghorza, who was standing at her evening watch position near the main door. The comments were ugly and inventive and said loudly enough to be heard. Ghorza did not react. She stood her post and looked at the middle distance with the expressionless calm of a woman who had decided this was not worth her time. Jasper put down his fork. He stood up from the bar and walked to the corner table, and the men looked up at him with the mild contempt that large drunken men extended to medium-sized sober ones. "You need to stop," Jasper said. "Or what?" said the larger one. "You her keeper, friend." "She is the watch at this inn," Jasper said, "which means when you disturb the peace of this inn she has the legal authority to remove you. I am suggesting you save yourself that experience." The man stood up. He was a head taller than Jasper and considerably broader, and he had his hand on his knife. The knife came out. The room went very quiet. The man was drunk and he was not actually intending to use it, Jasper suspected, but the blade was out and the situation had moved beyond the place where reason was going to do much useful work, and Jasper saw the arc of it. The man would lunge, Jasper would try to get out of the way, someone would get cut, the whole thing would escalate in the worst possible direction. And then Ghorza moved. She came from the door in about 2 steps, put herself entirely between Jasper and the knife with the efficiency of someone for whom this was a practiced response, and caught the man's knife wrist in one hand with a grip that turned his face gray. She was not violent about it. She did not draw her own blade or strike him. She simply held his wrist in a grip that immobilized his entire arm, looked him in the eye from 2 inches away, and said very quietly, "Do you want to know how many ways I can break this before you can call for help?" The man stared at her. The knife fell. She picked it up off the floor, walked to the bar, set it in front of the barkeeper, and returned to her post at the door. The corner table paid their bill and left 6 minutes later. Jasper stood in the middle of the common room and was aware of his heartbeat. Marta Holt, who had watched all of this from behind the bar without visibly moving, reached under the counter for the brandy again. Ghorza from the door said, "I am fine, Marta." "I know you are," Marta said. "The brandy is for him." Jasper accepted the brandy and looked across the room at Ghorza, who was looking back at him with one of those unguarded expressions she had stopped trying to hide. He crossed to the door, stood beside her, and said very quietly, "You threw yourself in front of a blade for me. You were going to stand there and take it. I had a plan." "You had a very bad plan." "Fair," he said. She was looking at him steadily. "I do not throw myself in front of blades for people I do not care about," she said. "I know." He looked down at his brandy cup, then back up at her. "I know, Ghorza." She reached out and tucked 2 fingers into the front of his shirt, just briefly, possessive and gentle at once, and then let go and went back to watching the room. He stood beside her for the rest of the watch. October came and the trade road went to mud, and the broken wheel filled with travelers who had been caught by the early season turn. Jasper's cavalry contract extended through winter because the garrison at Greymarsh held all year, which meant he was not going anywhere, and Ghorza stayed, and the room at the back of the 2nd floor was hers, and the evenings in the stable were theirs, and the feeling in Jasper's chest that he had been trying to identify since the first night had stopped being mysterious. He was in love with her. He had probably been halfway there by the 3rd day. He was all the way there now. He had not said it, because he was not entirely sure of the right way to say it, and because she was a woman who would not want it said carelessly, and also because there was part of him that still ran the old calculation. the one he had been running for 31 years about why someone extraordinary would want something ordinary, and kept coming up short on the math. She seemed to be running her own version of something. He could feel it in the way she watched him sometimes when she thought he was not looking, and in the way she had begun, in the evenings, to sit closer than was strictly necessary, her shoulder against his, or her hand finding his in the dark of the stable as naturally as reaching for a familiar tool. She touched him often and purposefully, and in the way that said mine, and he received it every time with the particular stunned gratitude of a man who had not expected to be claimed. One evening in late October, she came back from the East Road, where she had been running a guide contract for a trade wagon. A 3-day round trip she had been taking for the last few weeks as her leg healed to full strength, and her reputation for knowing the muddy shortcuts spread among the regular traders. She came through the stable door in road mud to the knees with her braid half undone and the pack at her shoulder heavy with wages, and Jasper was at the forge doing the last of the day's work, and he looked up, and the look on his face was one he had no practice hiding. She stopped inside the door. "You missed me," she said. "I missed you." She set her pack down and crossed the stable and kissed him with the mud of the road still on her and the cold of the night still in her hair, and he held her close, and she pressed her face against the side of his neck for a moment and just breathed, and he understood that she had missed him too. "I thought about something on the road," she said against his collar. "What?" "The claiming right." She pulled back enough to look at him. Her amber eyes were very direct. "In my clan, when a woman chooses a man fully, permanently, she can claim him before witnesses in the oldest rite. It is not a ceremony in the way that human marriages are ceremonies. It is a declaration. She kneels not in submission but in choice. It means that you bow to no one, but you choose to come level with this person, eye to eye." She paused. "It has not been done outside the clan in 2 generations. I have been thinking about it since the millway fork in the road at 3 in the morning, and I have not stopped thinking about it." Jasper Stone stood very still. "You are saying," he said carefully, "that you want to—" "I want to claim you," she said, "if you want to be claimed. I am not asking you to be less than you are. I am asking if you will be mine and let me be yours." She met his eyes without flinching. "I know I am a lot to take on." He made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite something else. "Ghorza, you are not a burden, you are the best part of my year." She looked at him for a long moment, and something in her face was soft and fierce and entirely her. "Is that yes?" she asked. "That is yes," he said, emphatically. She kissed him again, and this time it was long and warm and deep, and the forge behind them put out its low amber heat, and the horses breathed in their stalls, and the night outside was quiet. And Jasper Stone held the most remarkable woman he had ever met, and understood for the first time what it felt like to be exactly where you were supposed to be with exactly the person you were supposed to be with. There was a natural question of when, and where, and who the witnesses would be. Ghorza said the rite required at least 3 witnesses who knew both parties. Marta Holt was the obvious choice, and she accepted with a singleness of word that implied she had been expecting this for some time. The other 2 witnesses were Corin the barkeeper, who had seen enough of life at the Broken Wheel to be unsurprisable by anything, and a traveling merchant named de la Swick, who had been coming through the Broken Wheel on the Thornwall Run for 12 years, and had taken a strong liking to Ghorza after watching her flatten an argument with 2 river traders in October. Ghorza told Jasper what he needed to know about the rite. He listened carefully, the way he listened to everything. "You do not have to speak any formal words," she said. "You only have to receive my declaration and answer it with your own. What you say is up to you." "I will think about what I want to say," he said. "Good." She looked at him with the steadiness he had come to love. "Wear something decent." He owned 2 clean shirts and his good vest. He wore both. The morning they chose was clear and cold, a day in early November with a blue sky and the first frost still white on the inn-yard stone. Marta had said the inn-yard would be better than the stable because it had the light, and she was right. The four witnesses stood in a loose semicircle near the south wall where the sun reached warmly even in November. The regular morning traffic of the road went on beyond the gate, carters and riders going east and west, and none of them knew or cared about what was happening in the inn yard, which was exactly as it should be. Ghorza stood in front of him in her travel leathers, which she had cleaned and mended and relaced the night before. Her black hair was fully braided for the occasion, pulled back tight from her face with a single green cord that he did not remember seeing before. She was beautiful in a way that still struck him as something he needed a moment to adjust to, and she was looking at him with amber eyes that were calm and warm and utterly certain. She was always certain about the things she chose. That was one of the things he loved best about her. She held his gaze for a moment and then she knelt, not with difficulty, not with humility in the way that meant less than. She knelt the way she did everything, with full deliberateness, her spine straight and her head level so that her eyes were even with his, and the grace of it was in the choice. She had told him the right meant coming level-eye to eye, not bowing down. She was not beneath him. She was meeting him. "I am Ghorza Doomhammer," she said. Her voice carried across the yard clearly, a voice made for open space. "Scout of the Doomhammer clan, rider of the Eastern Grass, survivor of the Greywash ambush. I have been made low and I have remade myself. I have walked alone and I have found a man who looks at me like I am worth finding." Her amber eyes did not waver. "I claim you, Jasper Stone, before these witnesses and before whatever remains of the old sky that watches. I choose you for my own, not as a possession but as a partner, not out of need but out of want. You are my chosen. You are mine if you will be." The frost on the stone was white and the blue sky stretched above them, and the road went on behind the gate. And Jasper Stone stood in the winter light in his two clean shirts and his good vest and looked at this woman who had limped out of the dark into his lamplight. This woman who had survived the road and the ambush and the market and the hunters and 11 days of wounded travel and the distance of a life lived too long alone, and who had chosen him from all of that survival to be the person she stopped running for. He crouched so he was level with her. He took her hands. "I have been following cavalry contracts for 7 years," he said, "and every time the horses moved out I stayed. I think I thought that was just the nature of things, that I was the staying kind, the left-behind kind, the man in the stable while the rest of the world moved." He held her hands tightly, her calloused fingers wrapped in his. "And then you came in out of the dark limping and bleeding and prouder than anyone I have ever met, and I thought, here is something that is actually worth staying for, worth being here for." He met her eyes. "I am not a cavalryman, and I am not a man anyone writes songs about. I am a farrier. I fix what is broken and I keep what is strong, and I do it as well as I can every day." A pause. "But I love you. I love you the way I love the work, completely and without conditions, and I am yours if you will have me, whatever that means, wherever it goes." Ghorza Doomhammer looked at him for a moment that stretched and settled like warm iron taking its shape. Then she said, "I have you," and stood, pulling him up with her, and kissed him in the November light in the inn yard of the Broken Wheel, while Marta Holt said one quiet word of approval, and Corin the barkeeper clapped once, and Delas Swick made a noise that suggested she might be crying but was choosing to deny it. The road went on behind the gate. The sky was very blue. The frost on the stones would melt by midday. Jasper Stone and Ghorza Doomhammer stood claimed and claiming in the cold, clear morning, his hands in hers and her forehead against his, and the world was ordinary and extraordinary in equal measure, which was the best it ever got to be. In the weeks after, things were both different, and the same in the way that things are when the right change settles in rather than disrupts. Jasper still shod the cavalry horses. Ghorza still ran her guide contracts and her evening watch, and the wages she was building toward the clan road steadily grew. They talked about the Eastern Grass and what it meant to Ghorza to return, and Jasper listened to everything she said about the Doomhammer clan house and the council fires and the herd runs, and thought about them as real things, future things. "I have been thinking," Ghorza said one evening, "about whether a farrier would be useful on the Eastern Grass." He looked at her. My clan runs 200 horses, she said. They have a clan smith but no farrier. There is a significant difference between a smith and a farrier, as I have come to understand. She was watching him with her level amber gaze. I am not asking you to leave your work or your contracts. I am asking if you have ever thought about changing terrain. He had been thinking about it, in fact, since approximately the morning after the claiming. In the quiet back-of-mind way he thought about things before they were ready to be said. The cavalry garrison at Greymarsh cycles out in spring, he said. The new contract would go to whoever shows up. If I'm not here, someone else takes it. Yes, she said, watching him. The Doomhammer clan is near the Stoneback foothills, you said. Which means the horses work rocky ground. Very rocky. Rocky ground is hard on hooves. You need someone who knows how to shoe for it properly. You do. I do. He turned his cup in his hands. I have a wagon and 2 draft horses and a portable forge. It is the kind of work that goes wherever it is needed. She reached across and put her hand over his. It is, she said, exactly that kind of work. He looked at her hand on his. He looked at her. He turned his hand over and held hers. Spring, he said. Spring, she agreed. In time for the first herd run. Marta Holt, when told, said, good, and refilled his tea without being asked, which was her highest expression of blessing. Corin, the barkeeper, shook his hand. Delas Swick, when she came through on her next Thornwall run, hugged Ghorza, who endured this with the expression of a woman who was privately moved but would not say so. They spent the winter at the Broken Wheel, and it was a good winter. Cold and working, and full of the ordinary warmth of 2 people who had stopped being alone. There was a night in December that Jasper would remember for a very long time. The fire in the stable banked high against the first serious freeze. The horses settled and warm. Ghorza beside him in the lamplight with her legs across his lap and her braid loose and the sound of the wind against the eaves. And he thought, this is the thing. This is the thing that was worth waiting for. She caught him looking at her and said, what? Nothing, he said, just making a memory. She looked at him for a moment with those amber eyes full of something warm and private, and then she leaned over and kissed his cheek with a gentleness that was entirely hers and tucked her face against his shoulder. Make many, she said. We will have time. When the slavers' charter was gone, and the documents were filed, and Sorn was a receding concern in the east, there was still the question of the formal record. Ghorza had submitted the treaty clause and the nullity declaration to the Greymarsh Provincial Archive by the 2nd week of November, and the provincial archivist returned a confirmation by post in December that stated the writ of Edric Sorn had been officially struck, and that any subsequent writ on the same claim would be denied on filing. She held that confirmation in her hands in the kitchen of the Broken Wheel and read it twice, and then set it on the table with the careful deliberateness of a woman putting down something heavy. Over, she said. Jasper sat across the table from her. Over. She looked at the document. She looked at him. And then she did something he had not seen her do, something she had been holding, he suspected, for a very long time. She pressed her hands over her face and was quiet for a moment, just a moment, and her shoulders shook once. He did not speak. He reached across and put his hand between her shoulder blades, steady and warm. When she looked up, her eyes were dry and her face was exactly as composed as it always was, but something in it was lighter. Something old had put itself down. Right, she said. I am going to make sure Marta knows about this. She already knows, Jasper said. She was listening from the hallway. Of course she was, Ghorza said, and her voice was almost entirely steady, and she stood and went to find Marta, and Jasper listened to the 2 of them in the hallway speaking quietly, and he heard Marta say one word, and then he heard Ghorza make a sound that was just barely, briefly, the sound of a woman who had not cried in front of anyone in a very long time, finally permitting herself to. He stayed in the kitchen and let them have it. By January, Ghorza had enough in wages to cover the spring road with comfort. She began writing letters to the Doomhammer clan house through the postal rider who came through the Broken Wheel weekly, and the replies came back in Orcish glyph script that she read aloud to Jasper in the evenings, translating as she went. The clan was well. The herd had come through the autumn in good condition. Her cousin Vreth, who was warband captain now, sent word that the clan house had been asking about her return for some time. The clan council, in a separate letter written in the formal glyph hand that indicated official communication, stated that any warband partner returning from the Duskbane period was to be received with full honors, and that if she was bringing a chosen partner, the clan would welcome him. "They will not say that easily," she told him. "It is not the custom to welcome a non-orc partner without council debate. That they put it in formal glyph means the debate has already happened." "Was that because of your letters? I was honest about what you did," she said, "and about what you are." She folded the letter. "They want to meet you. Are you nervous about that?" She thought about it with the honesty she brought to everything. "I am not nervous. I am interested. I have not seen them in 2 years." A pause. "You are going to stand very still when Vreth looks you over because she has the same expression as Marta Holt, and you will know it when you see it." He laughed. "I can stand very still." "I know you can," she said. "You are going to be fine." The thing about Jasper Stone was that he had always been fine in the places people forgot to look for capable men. He had built a life out of being reliable in the background, the man who made the horses ready so that other men could ride. He had thought for a long time that this was all he was. A background man. Ghorza had chosen him from the foreground. She had walked into his lamplight and looked at him directly and decided he was worth stopping for. Not because of who he could become or what he could provide, but because of what he already was. Steady, honest, brave in the quiet way, and capable of looking at a remarkable woman and seeing her clearly rather than flinching. She told him once in February, when the road was frozen and the broken wheel was snowed in for 4 days, and they spent the time in the kitchen with cards and conversation, and the slow warmth of being confined to the same small space. "You know what you gave me the first night. Not the bandaging. Before that, what? You gave me a stool and walked away. You did not watch me to make sure I was staying. You did not guard the door. You just gave me the stool and went to get supplies." She looked at the cards in her hands. 4 months of being owned and watched and managed, and you just gave me a stool and trusted me to sit in it." She put a card down. "That was the first thing." He was quiet for a moment. "I figured you needed to make your own choices." "Yes," she said. "That is exactly what I needed." They sat in the snow-quiet kitchen of the broken wheel with the cards between them, and outside the world was frozen and still, and inside it was warm and lit and ordinary, and Jasper Stone thought about all the things you gave someone without knowing that you were giving them something. In early March the roads began to clear. Jasper began packing the wagon in the mornings, organizing the portable forge and the iron stock, and the tools of his trade with the methodical care he applied to everything. And Ghorza packed her own things in the evenings, which were not many but were chosen with the deliberateness of someone who carried only what was real. On the last morning, Marta Holt came to the stable before the sun was fully up. She gave Jasper a sealed letter. "For the district garrison at Greymark," she said. "Recommendation for the farrier contract to your replacement. Specify the nail grades or they will get a hack job." She gave Ghorza a wrapped bundle that turned out to contain a good winter cloak and a small bottle of the expensive yarrow paste she had been making in Marta's kitchen since October. "The cloak is for the mountain crossing," she said. "The pass gets cold in March." "Marta," Ghorza said. "I know," Marta said. "Go on, you have a good road today." Jasper shook her hand and she held it for a moment, and the look she gave him was the look of a woman who had seen a lot of travelers come through a lot of doors and knew the difference between the ones going somewhere worth going. Ghorza hugged her. It was quick and strong, and Marta patted her on the shoulder blade twice. Then they climbed up onto the wagon board. Jasper shook the reins, and Burn and Collar moved out of the broken wheel in yard and onto the trade road heading east, and then north toward the Stoneback foothills and the eastern grass and the clan house of the Doomhammer, where 200 horses waited for a farrier, and a warband council was ready to meet the man their scout had chosen in the dark of a November night in a trade road stable. The road unrolled ahead of them in the early spring light, still cold, still hard-packed with the last of winter, but the sky was pale blue, and the trees at the road's edge had the first fragile green of the seasons beginning at their tips, and the world was opening. Ghorza sat beside him on the board with her new cloak around her shoulders and her knife at her belt and her braided hair loose at the end from a night's sleep, and not yet retied. She was watching the road with her scout's eyes, mapping everything, logging every turn and marker and crossroad. The woman who had survived the ambush at Greywash Creek and the market at Crossfield and the 11 days of wounded travel and the hunters on the trade road, and had arrived into his lamplight with nothing but 11 silvers and ferocious pride, and the knowledge of what she deserved. After a while she reached over and tucked her hand into the crook of his arm, a small gesture, domestic and warm. "Comfortable?" he asked. "Yes," she said. She leaned slightly against his shoulder. "Tell me something about the horses." "Which ones?" "Burn and Collar." "I have been with them 6 months and I still do not know which is which. Burn is the one on the left. He has a slightly longer face and he does not like mud. Collar is on the right. She likes people. She would let anyone lead her anywhere, which is a bad quality in a draft horse, but she is forgiving of bad roads, so it balances." Ghorza watched the horses for a moment. Collar pulled harder through the Hensbridge crossing. "The mud." "Yes. She hates it less than Burn does." "Good horse," Ghorza said, with professional appreciation. They drove through the morning, the wagon rolling east and north on the trade road, and the day warmed as the sun climbed, and the frost came off the road, and the world shook off winter inch by inch. They stopped at midday at a roadside spring and ate from Marta's provisions, sitting on the wagon board with the horses drinking from the trough, and Ghorza told him the names of the eastern plants she recognized beginning to come up at the road edge, and he told her the load limits for different shoe gauges on rocky ground, and it was such a specific and unromantic conversation, and it was absolutely what it was. Two people who knew each other well and liked each other's knowledge, and had the rest of the road ahead of them. At the day's end they pulled off the road at a traveler's post, a simple shelter with a fire ring and a horse rail, and Jasper built a fire and Ghorza cooked the salt pork with the efficiency of someone who had been living on trail food for months and had opinions about it. They ate by the fire with the dark coming in from the east, and overhead the stars were coming out one by one, the way they did in the spring when the air was still cold enough to be clear. Ghorza leaned against his side with her face tilted up, watching the stars the way she watched everything, with full attention and intelligence. "The Stoneback crossing is 4 days from here," she said. "After that the foothills road for 2 days and then the grass, and the clan house, a pause. Vreth is going to want to test you on horses. She always does it to new people." "What kind of test?" "She will give you a difficult horse and watch what you do. She tested every warband partner I ever had." She glanced at him. "She has never been satisfied." "Difficult how?" "Head shy, prone to biting." She was watching him steadily. "What will you do?" He thought about it the way he thought about every horse. "I will stand at the edge of the paddock for a while and let it decide I am boring. Then I will approach from the left, which is less threatening for most horses. I will offer my hand palm down at shoulder height and wait. It will bite or it will sniff." He paused. "If it bites I will make a loud noise, which is what another horse would do, and try again. I will do this for as long as it takes." Ghorza was very quiet. "What?" he said. "That is exactly right," she said. "That is what my clan's horse handlers have done for 6 generations." He looked at her. She looked back at him with amber eyes full of warm private light. "You are going to be fine with Vreth," she said. He smiled. "I thought so." She made a sound that was his favorite of all her sounds, that low, warm, definitive laugh, and pressed her face against his shoulder, and the fire cracked and the stars wheeled overhead, and the eastern grass was 4 days away, and the road was real and theirs. They reached the Stoneback foothills on the 4th day as Ghorza had predicted, and the clan house of the Doomhammer on the 6th. The clan house was built in the traditional way, a compound of stone and hide structures on a low hill above the first spring pastures, with the herd visible in the distance, dark shapes moving against the gold green of the new grass, and smoke rising from multiple fires, and the sound of voices carrying on the cold morning air. Ghorza sat up straighter on the board as they came up the hill road, and Jasper could feel the change in her, something that had been braced for a long time gently releasing. The people who came out to meet the wagon were perhaps 20, a mix of ages and faces, all of them carrying the broad-shouldered, direct-eyed quality that he was coming to understand was specifically Doomhammer. They watched the wagon approach with the assessment of a people who had seen enough of the world to be thorough about new things. Ghorza stepped down from the wagon board before it had fully stopped. The woman who came forward to meet her was tall even by orc standards, with close-cropped gray-black hair and a scar across her chin and eyes the same amber as Ghorza's but older, and she walked like a war-band captain who had been one for long enough that it had stopped being a role and become a fact. This was Vreth. She looked at Ghorza for a long moment with the expression of someone who had been checking the road from the clan house for longer than she would say. Then she put her arms around her and held her, and Ghorza held back, her eyes closed, and the two of them stood like that for long enough that Jasper quietly finished stopping the wagon and stepped down and stood beside it and waited. When Vreth looked up at him over Ghorza's shoulder, the look was the one Ghorza had promised, comprehensive and unhurried and entirely without approval or disapproval yet. "You are the farrier," Vreth said. "Jasper Stone," he said. "The horses are in the east paddock. One of them will not let anyone near. He has thrown 3 handlers in the last month." She was looking at him steadily. "I would be interested to see what you do." Ghorza, over Vreth's shoulder, gave him a look that was both warning and encouragement in one. "Show me which one," Jasper said. He spent 2 hours in the east paddock with a gray mountain horse named by the handlers as Trouble, which was accurate. The horse was head-shy and nervous, and had clearly been mishandled at some point in its past, and was entirely justified in trusting nobody. Jasper stood at the paddock fence for 20 minutes, doing nothing, looking at nothing in particular. Then he climbed in and stood in the center of the paddock and waited some more. The horse circled. Jasper was still. Vreth watched from the fence. So did several others. So did Ghorza with her arms crossed and her chin level. The gray horse came to him after 40 minutes. It sniffed his outstretched hand and did not bite. Jasper ran a slow hand along its neck and the horse stood for it. Behind him he heard Vreth say nothing for a long moment. Then she said, to someone nearby, "Him." And Ghorza from the fence made a sound that was entirely one of satisfaction. The evening council fire was large and the clan was gathered, and Jasper sat beside Ghorza in the firelight with the stars very large overhead, and the smell of horse and grass and wood smoke in the cold air. And the council acknowledged what Ghorza had told them in her letters, that she had returned, that she brought her chosen, that the claiming rite had been performed before witnesses and was binding. The council spoke in Orcish and Ghorza translated quietly in his ear, her breath warm against his temple, and he listened to everything and watched the firelight move over the faces of her people. Vreth, speaking for the council, said that Jasper Stone was received as the chosen of Ghorza Doomhammer, and that the clan extended its recognition. She said it with the formal glyph weight that Ghorza had explained meant it was real and would not be revisited. Then she looked at Jasper across the fire and said, in plain speech, "The gray horse is yours to shoe when he is ready. He will let you." "I know," Jasper said. Vreth made a sound that was not quite Ghorza's laugh but was clearly related to it. "Good," she said, and it meant, Jasper understood now, exactly what it always meant in this family. Ghorza leaned against him in the firelight, her shoulder warm and solid against his, her amber eyes on the fire and on her people and on the wide dark sky above the eastern grass. "Well," she said, quiet and for him alone. "Well," he agreed. "We are home," she said. He felt the word land in him the way the right iron lands in the quench, clean and solid and finished. "Yes," he said, "we are." The fire cracked. The stars burned. The herd moved in the dark of the far pasture, 200 horses on the eastern grass, and somewhere in the compound, the gray mountain horse stood quietly in his stall without throwing anyone. And the Doomhammer clan talked and ate and kept alive the things worth keeping. And Jasper Stone sat in the middle of it all and understood that he had stopped being the man who watched the horses move out. He had become, instead, the man who had arrived.